What's up, guys? This is Josh Peterson of Humanican Media.
And I'm Gerald Glassford, and we're from the Pop Culture Cosmos and the PCC Multiverse. And you're listening to Grab Them by the Pod right here on the ACE Podcast Network.
Are you going to buy them dinner first?
I might as well.
Welcome back to Grab Them by the Pod. I'm Kevin, along with Jesse, here to talk to you about some Donald Trump, politics, the world of Washington, and all that it has to offer, which these days is a lot.
You know, we try to come into this show every week with an idea of what we're going to say. It's becoming increasingly more difficult because things break. It seems like it's 6 o'clock every day before we go on, sometimes a little later. It's about 9 o'clock on the East Coast here. And just a few minutes ago, I got a little alert on my phone that said Attorney General Jeff Sessions offered to resign after tensions grew with Trump. It's still developing, so there's really not much out there, but it just says the relationship began to deteriorate after Sessions recused himself in March from the Russian investigation. It's unclear when Sessions offered to resign, but the moment was brief, and Sessions made his offer as a suggestion after weeks of frustration, according to two people close to the White House who requested to speak anonymously. And we know how the Trump administration feels about anonymous sources, except when it benefits them. But it's interesting that I guess Trump just doesn't like anybody, even the people who do his bidding.
Well, it's been said that Donald Trump doesn't really listen to anybody. He trusts his own gut instinct and he goes with it. So regardless of how highly qualified any of his cabinet members, his advisors, his attorney general might be, he doesn't really value their opinion. He's going to go with what he believes is best.
And it's weird because I don't like Trump, but I also don't like his attorney general. So I don't know whose side I take on this one. But you think you put people in these positions to listen to them, even if we don't like them, he should be liking what they say, or he should like their opinion or trust it. So it's just really odd. So I'm sure we'll have more to say on that next week if more comes out. But I want to start off talking about this Thursday. It's going to be a big, big day. I've been waiting for a long time. It's the Comey hearing. It's going to appear before the Senate Intelligence Committee. Put it on your calendars. Mark it down. It's must-see TV. I'm actually afraid it may actually break the internet or break C-SPAN or break these channels because I feel everybody's eyes are going to be watching this.
Yeah, it's going to be riveting television. According to CNN, this will be the quote-unquote Super Bowl of Washington, D.C. and politics. For once, perhaps watching C-SPAN won't be as, silly as some people think it is. It's going to be riveting TV. It's going to be people glued to it, waiting to see if that, the other foot is going to drop here with what Comey has to say.
I actually had a friend reach out to me today that I told her about C-SPAN, that you can download it on or watch it online. She thought it was just the channels, and she started watching it and then realized, I'm getting pissed off now because I think Betsy DeVos was on there today. And she's, I can't stand listening to her. It's making me upset. So, it's a double-edged sword. It's good to get to watch this, but then you get to actually watch it, which isn't always a lot of fun.
Well, I've been saying for years that C-SPAN is good television. I enjoy watching it. Maybe it's just because I really like politics, but you can learn a lot from watching it too. And in these trying times, we need to be on top of our politicians. We need to know what's going on. And if we don't, we run the risk of losing our grip on democracy. So people, start tuning in to C-SPAN.
You can see all the nonsense that actually goes on in Washington, D.C. But so it's interesting. There's a lot of information that's kind of leaked out over the last couple of days. There's a lot of people worried that Trump may try to use executive privilege and make it so that Comey can't testify. But yesterday, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, said, no, well, we're not going to do that. He can testify, in her little southern draw. But then sources came out today saying that ABC News spoke to somebody who swears that Comey is not going to say that Trump interfered with the FBI investigation. I think he just wants to go in there and say, I didn't tell him 3 times that he's under investigation. People are trying to spin this as, he's going to say that Trump didn't do anything wrong. I think in Comey fashion, he's like not going to say one way or the other. He's like, I can't speak to that, but here's what I can speak to.
Right. The facts will come out on either side of this depending on what actually happened. And I think you're right. I think Comey tries to be a straight shooter and he tries to go by the book and be factual. So he's not necessarily trying to be an alarmist or a Chicken Little, if you will. He's just going to give it to you what he has, the facts and the information that he's collected based on his conversations with the president.
Now, again, as always, things are always popping up. I was actually just sent an article here that says top intelligence official told associates Trump asked him if he could intervene with Comey on FBI probe. Let's see. The nation's top intelligence official told associates in March that President Trump asked him if he could interview with then FBI Director Comey to get the Bureau to back off its investigation. So there's another story every 5 seconds. This is less than a week after being confirmed by the Senate. So this is former Senator Dan Coates, who's Director of National Intelligence. So, I feel like the second we say anything and post it online, it's already old news. So, we'll wait for this to see what plays out. Why even bother talking about this whole Russia thing until the Comey hearing happens? Because that's gonna be what the news is, right? Am I crazy here?
No, you're absolutely right. And the interesting thing will be to see what does the White House do in response to all of this. It's kind of clear that the White House needs some sort of coordinated response, but according to Axios's Mike Allen, they don't seem to have any kind of clear response lined up. They're not sure of what and how they're going to respond to any of this. So this could continue to be the circus that we've been seeing out of the White House in the last month or so.
I mean, their response is going to be Trump apparently thinking about live tweeting this entire hearing if he feels it's necessary. And I mean, that's not good news for Trump or his administration. If he just gets angry at Comey saying something, starts calling him a liar or calling him a loser or calling him whatever. I know he didn't put Comey in place, but if he's hearing now from people like Dan Coates, who he nominated, who he put in the position, and they're even saying some things are not kosher, so to speak, it's just a ticking time bomb.
Trump has plenty of advisors telling him that he should stop tweeting, that he should stop talking. But yet again, as we've said, he doesn't really care about the opinions of these advisors.
Kellyanne Conway's husband is saying, shut up.
So he's going to do what he's going to do, and that could be to his own detriment.
No, most likely. So anybody who wants to watch this, it's going to be Thursday, 10 o'clock Eastern time. You can watch it on your television. I would say Fox, CNN, and MSNBC, and probably other ones will all be airing it. C-SPAN will be airing it. If you go to C-SPAN's website or probably any of these news channels' websites, I mean, it's going to be everywhere. I can't imagine you're not going to be able to find it. Just make sure you have good bandwidth and stuff, because I think it's going to be a lot of people crowding the lines.
Yes, it's already been announced that the big three, the traditional mainstream media that the president likes to lampoon,
fake news,
is ABC, CBS, NBC. They're all going to be broadcasting it live. So you can tune into any major American news network and most of the minor ones as well, and you'll be able
Al Jazeera America or Headline News. Yeah. Well, yeah, Trump, he just can't stop tweeting. We've mentioned that, and we'll probably be mentioning this podcast until the day we're done doing this podcast. So this morning, he went on a Twitter rampage. He continued his Twitter rampage, I probably should say. He started saying how the fake mainstream media is working hard to get me not to use social media. They hate that I get an honest and unfiltered message out. No. I mean, we're not the only ones saying that. The mainstream media aren't the only people saying this. His own people, as you just pointed out, are saying this. But he doesn't care. He just keeps wanting to say that, the CBS, NBC, ABC, all these places are fake news. And if we relied on them, we'd never get the true story, and he would never be in the White House. But it's just him projecting, I think, that he doesn't like that these places call him on his BS when he's surrounded by yes men and sycophants.
Right. If he keeps making these accusations, he can keep deflecting away from the real problem and the real issues that he's creating.
That's totally Trumpian, though, you could say. He also said that during a recent trip to the Middle East, he started talking to people from Saudi Arabia and other places, and they all pointed to Qatar as being a place of radical ideology. And I don't exactly know what he's saying to do with Qatar. By the way, do you say Qatar or Qatar?
Well, interesting that you should ask this. The actual pronunciation seems to be up in the air, but according to a 2010 report by NPR's Mike Pesca, the pronunciation that the government of Qatar gave him was that it should sound somewhat like guitar, like Qatar,
yeah,
with the emphasis on the k and the tar. But then they also said, but everybody already pronounces it that way anyway. But
yeah,
if you've listened to any news reports on the country over the last 10 years, you've had any one of a dozen or more pronunciations of the name.
Well, it's like spelling Muammar Gaddafi's name. There's no real one answer. I say Qatar. It upsets me. It's like when people. I remember watching a news story on like sexual harassment, but the newsman said sexual harassment. That upsets me. No, that's not how you say it. It's always the Caribbean, except for the Pirates of the Caribbean. These are the things that stick out in my mind.
Does that upset you as much as former President Obama's use of the term ISIL instead of ISIS or Pakistan?
Yes, Pakistan. I do not like that. I don't like Saddam Hussein. I did to point out the other day that someone said they were going to Nevada, and I said, I believe if you're from there, it's called Nevada. I say Nevada though, but
tomato.
It's regional. Let's call the whole thing off. So Bahrain, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates all announced they're cutting the diplomatic ties to Qatar, whatever. They say that Qatar supports extremist groups. It's weird that Trump is like so much touting Saudi Arabia's view on this because we all know Saudi Arabia was tied to 9/11, or all the people who did 9/11 were from Saudi Arabia, and not to mention that there's a gigantic U.S. airbase in Qatar right now. So you should not be doing this kind of diplomatic work through Twitter. This is for the Secretary of State. This is for the Secretary of Defense, not for Trump doing 143 characters.
Right. And, the idea that we throw Saudi Arabia into this, given their connection to what happened on 9/11, perhaps that's because they've been feeding the president all of the steak and ketchup he could eat.
Have it. Just throw it in the oven, put it on high for an hour and pull it out. They're good to go. Now, I don't know who – I probably should have researched this. I apologize. What, do they have a king in Qatar? Is it a prime minister or whatever? But there's a video and GIF out there or GIF, depending on who you're talking to, out there of him like 3 weeks ago shaking hands with a dude. Like it was all good. So – much like all his views on international diplomacy just go wherever the winds carry him. And, you can really screw up domestically when you do this kind of stuff. You can start a war when you do this stuff internationally. It's not funny.
So the true test will be the 2022 World Cup, which Qatar is hosting. Will the United States pull a 1980 Olympic Games in Moscow? Will we boycott?
Well, the whole thing is ridiculous to begin with. That's one I think Chicago lost out to, pissed off Obama, and really pissed off, I think, Clinton went over there. It's because I think during the time of these games, the average temperature in Qatar is like 126 degrees. So, yeah, that's going to work. And I think there was some shenanigans going on with that, too. But that's for people who are more into football than I am to comment on. By the way, speaking of terrorism, it's interesting. John McCain came out this weekend and said he thinks Putin and Russia are actually more dangerous in the world stage than ISIS. ISIS, he said, can do terrible things, but the Russians tried to fundamentally destroy our democracy and tried to screw our elections up. And he views Putin and the Russians as a far greater challenge. And I got to say, I agree with him because – believe me, ISIS is horrible. I can't even imagine having to deal with that stuff if I was over there. But you can, as bizarre as you can kind of predict the way they're going to act. But with Putin, he's on the down low and doing God knows what and using his diplomacy to really screw with our way of life.
Well, here's what I think on this. And for this, I'm going to defer to Mary Dejevsky of The Guardian, the British newspaper, who says that we have a skewed vision of the power that ISIS has. So, in support of the idea that Putin is more of a threat than ISIS, ISIS has actually lost ground in recent months. But because of their ability to use social media, the internet, and to show their barbaric ways, we get this false sense that they are more successful than they really are. Whereas Russia actually has a military that is probably, third in line after the United States and China that could really do damage on an international stage, whereas ISIS doesn't have that capability. Now, what Dejevsky says is that Russia isn't really, or at least she believes Russia isn't really in the mood for fighting, whereas ISIS, has been using their muscle that they can. That she doesn't really believe that Putin is actually out to try to fight anybody, but, who knows? But in my mind, I would say that, ISIS, as far as a threat to the United States is concerned, Putin and Russia really do pose a bigger one.
What went on in London this last weekend is horrible. When that stuff happens in America or happens anywhere else in the world, it's just flat out horrible. And we see that, and it's a huge bang. Like, someone has been shot, someone has been stabbed, something has been blown up, and it's horrible. What Russia does, and I'm afraid I should probably lock up my computer after this. God knows what might happen. But they can, as McCain mentioned, they can fundamentally destroy democracy in your country and do it on the down low and do it so that half the country kind of just doesn't care. And if that happens repeatedly all over the world, it's a big deal. And the fact that it's kind of with a sigh that we get when we speak about it instead of going, oh my God, I think that's why some people just think the big booms that come out of ISIS are that much more dangerous.
Well, but according to Putin, it's not the Russian government anyway that's hacking into our elections or hacking into our system. It's just patriotic people.
It's like, what reality? They arrested somebody. Was it Reality Winner?
Reality Winner.
What the hell kind of name is? I didn't understand the story for the longest time because that name is just so bizarre.
Somebody who won a reality television show?
Yeah,
no, that's just actually her name.
Yeah, I mean, I guess she leaked some stuff out there. Obviously, not the. Did you see that? By the way, I read an article very briefly that Michael Moore, who I am no fan of, set up some site called like Trumpy Leaks, where people can feel safe to leak information. And it's so tough for me to look at this because, leaking is illegal, but it's also when it's for your person, you like it. I won't pretend to have the moral high ground on this when it comes to anything, because if they leaked it on somebody that I liked, I'd be upset. If it was against Trump, I'd be like, well, let's get the news out there so we're prepared. We have all the information. I don't know.
Hadn't heard of that, so we keep an eye on it.
Yeah, and I lied. I didn't read the article. I just saw the title of the article and go, I'll look at that later on.
Very Trumpian of you.
He is very Trump fake. Speaking of that terrorist attack in London, so Trump, sometimes saying less is more. He tweeted out the other day that the pathetic excuse by London Mayor Sadiq Khan, who, by the way, is Muslim, and I think that just pisses off Trump, who had to think fast on his no reason to be alarmed statement. Mainstream media is working hard to sell it. He basically mad that Khan said that, in the coming days, we're going to have an increased police presence around here. Like, don't be worried. You're saying, this isn't – nothing else is imminent. We're just doing this as we get through this whole crisis. And Trump acted like he's saying, don't worry about terrorist attacks. It's no big deal. He basically misrepresented what Khan was doing. And can you imagine – our good friend Harry Enton actually pointed this out on Twitter a day or two ago. Could you imagine if Tony Blair made that same kind of comment to Rudy Giuliani after 9/11? Oh, my God, the world would have exploded.
Well, see – Blair wouldn't do that because he has tact and class and, was an actual man of his government. But, yeah, I couldn't imagine him doing that as well. Again, this is just Donald Trump being the classic elementary schoolyard bully.
Yeah. It's funny. By the way, if Blair actually had done that, I don't think we would have known, because that British accent, man, everything just sounds so proper and polite. They can put us down and we're like, wow, that sounded pretty classy. I just don't understand why he had to say anything to Khan. And it's going against, I guess, Trump's global agenda, but there was just no reason to say any of that. So this all came together with Trump going full ahead on the travel ban. Yes, capital letters, travel ban. He tweeted out the other day that the lawyers in the courts can call whatever they want, but I'm calling it what we need. This is, again, I always have trouble reading his tweets because they're not great, but I'm calling it what we need and what it is. A travel ban. So Sean Spicer has repeatedly said since January, this is not a travel ban, but Trump doesn't mind making his people look stupid. Secretary Huckabee Sanders the other day said, he doesn't care what it's called. He cares that he saves American lives. But again, that wasn't Sean Spicer saying that. This is going to hurt their case, by the way, in the long run, because he keeps talking about how this is just a watered down version of the previous one. And they're in court right now saying this is different than the other one. This is why I think he might be in trouble with Comey. He just can't keep his mouth shut and gets in trouble for it.
Right. It's hurting his case. Right. You're arguing before the Supreme Court that this is not a travel ban. And here's the president, theoretically the chief author of this, saying that it is a travel ban, contradicting his own advisors and the people doing his bidding. So, it's not going to play well before SCOTUS.
Before SCOTUS. And Interesting that he yells at DOJ for this. He's the person that signed it. The first one was signed in the broad day that everybody was watching, but the second one was signed behind doors, no cameras, no anything. If he didn't like the new version, if he thought it was watered down, he shouldn't have signed it. Don't go around. I can't believe I'm saying don't pick on Jeff Sessions, but don't pick on Jeff Sessions. This particular thing is not necessarily his fault. This is Trump's fault.
Right, and he just keeps blabbering away. It's only going to hurt his case. And as you mentioned before, Jess, that even people from his circle, right, Kellyanne Conway's husband, who's New York City Attorney George T. Conway III, wrote this week that Trump's comments, in quote, might make some people feel better, but won't win a Supreme Court majority.
Yeah, I don't think he has this going in the Supreme Court. It's been found unconstitutional. Yes, a guy out in an island in the middle Pacific found the second one to be unconstitutional, as Jeff Sessions would say. But yeah, I don't think this is going to do him any favors if it goes to the Supreme Court right now. Well, we've got to keep the extreme vetting up no matter what. And I also like how he said over the weekend that we have to stop being so politically correct and get down to the business of security for our people. Now, I know this is a stretch and it may be unfair, but when I see him saying, we have to stop political correctness and get down to business security for our people, it's the only way to keep them safe. I'm like, well, we have to suspend the Constitution. It's the only way to keep us safe. Like, I feel like it's a slippery slope sometimes when you start saying, don't pay attention to this because your safety is what we have to focus on. Because people, when they're afraid, make stupid mistakes and stupid decisions, and that's why people throughout history have used people's fear of their own safety to get some of their crazy things passed and on the books.
Right, and if you were watching New Day with Chris Cuomo on CNN this morning, Nancy Pelosi, majority leader in the House of Reps, who we're not always a fan of, she did come out and say that Trump's thoughts are, in quote, a complete disregard for the Constitution, end quote. Right, so people are calling this what it is. When you are repeatedly calling this a travel ban, when you are sidestepping your people that you have speaking for you that are saying that it is not a travel ban, and then you come out and say it as the president, you are showing a complete disregard for the Constitution.
I mean, this is the equivalent, maybe not the equivalent, but close enough that if Bill Clinton's spokesman had said, like, he did not have sexual relations with that woman, and then in the trial he comes out and goes, well, I had sexual relations with that woman. Like, what? No, that's not what you're supposed to say. I swear, I just binged last week on House of Cards, the newest season. It is eerie how much of that show just coincides with what's happening right now, and the vast majority of it was created before the election. So it's I guess it's art imitating life, but
or the other way around.
Life imitating
art.
Yeah, it's like simultaneously though. It's freaky. So if this podcast had come out just a few days ago, this next topic would have been the number one thing we discussed. But God forbid anything just be nice and calm for a few days. The Paris Agreement was all everybody could talk about last Thursday, I think it was. We had mentioned this actually in the last podcast that Trump planned to pull the U.S. out of the Paris Agreement. It has to do with climate change and things like that. And sure enough, he pulled us out in this bizarre Rose Garden speech that he must have filled with all people who love him because they were always clapping for him, and they had Scott Pruitt there, who was I'm trying to think of a nice way to say this.
He was his hype man.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I was going to be much more crude in the way I said. So now the United States, we're one of 3 countries, including Syria and Nicaragua, who are not part of the Paris Agreement, and it should be noted that Nicaragua is only out because they wanted to be tougher. So not good.
And Syria is in the middle of a bloody civil war, so we can forget them.
Yeah, there is no government there. But Elon Musk and Bob Iger, they were Elon Musk of Tesla and Bob Iger of Disney. They pulled out of Trump's advisory council. A lot of these people had said, we're sticking around because we think we can do more good. But even people on Trump's side again, like Rex Tillerson, were saying, don't pull out of this. But why listen to anybody around him? It's a mess.
And advisors in name only.
Really. Advisors in name only. They're there to fill a position. Trump claims that pulling out is going to bring more jobs, less debt, cleaner air to the country. But it's nonsense. He says the world is laughing at us, and, they're not laughing at us. They're laughing in our direction, but I don't think they're laughing at us.
Well, Jesse, do you think that the world, and I certainly hope this, that the world sees through Trump and that he doesn't really represent all of America?
I think people like Merkel do. But I don't know what the German citizens do.
Right.
I just see people at NATO and some of these G7 just going, Jesus Christ, I can't believe this is what's going on there. It's not like people loved America following 9/11. We have the view of being cowboys over here and American, the loud American. I think it had gotten better in recent years, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's tough because I met with one of my cousins this week. And leans more right. I didn't go into him whether he's a big Trump fan or not, but he's more conservative than I am. Although he did say he was going to listen to the show because he does like people who try to be down the middle. Although I guess we haven't been as down the middle for him as I would have liked this episode. But his kind of side, he sees that as what's going on probably is correctly. We're taking the right steps in this. So we're complaining the world sees us as being horrible. Maybe they're looking at it and saying, the world is seeing that we're strong, and that the world will see that we put us first. So honestly, I should reach out to some of my Swedish friends, see what they think. I do have a few of them.
Sverige har statsminister. That's my Swedish.
Yes, I can say hello. How are you? I don't speak Swedish, and a few of the things that are even in Swedish are not fit for this podcast. So let's go over a few of the things that Trump claimed or that Trump thinks. You said that China and India are going to be allowed to build coal plants, and we can't. That's not fair. What the hell? It's funny. The Paris Agreement doesn't actually have the word coal in it. It requires countries to publicly announce their plans to meet carbon emission reduction goals. In the end, they can be shamed into not following, or if they don't follow them. But China's already reduced its dependence on coal, and they're canceling construction of 100 coal-firing plants. India's pledged to reduce emissions by 33 to 35% by 2030. So they're going in the right direction. I don't know what Trump thinks. I think Trump figures, we're going to have to stop using coal, and then India's going to become one gigantic coal plant.
Right, as if the smog in China and India, would you want to be in China on a 100-degree day in the middle of, Beijing or one of the other major cities? They know it. They know that they've got to cut back for their own health and risking the future of their country. But dropping out of the Paris Accord sets us behind in being able to capitalize on clean energy development. Okay, the USA Today quoted Shale Can of GTM Research, which does market analysis on next-generation energy solutions, as saying the biggest danger in leaving the accord is that you lose your seat at the negotiating table for talks to come. And if you're not able to negotiate bilateral agreements, that can impact U.S. exports of our own leading energy technology.
Now, the good news is, by the way, this whole process about getting out isn't really completed until a day or two after the next 2020 election. So I guess theoretically, if another president came in there and changed his mind, they could put us right back in. I don't know what that process would take. But I guess not all is not lost for the moment. But going towards some of the green jobs right now, there are so many more jobs. Coal is dead. Let me repeat it. Coal is dead. And I have friends from West Virginia.
Period.
Yeah, period. Coal's it's the way of the dinosaur. My friends from West Virginia may be very upset with me when I say this, but it's just a fact. There are so many more clean energy jobs and solar jobs right now than there are in the coal industry. But you play, people see that the miner, the hardworking miner in West Virginia, coal sit on their face, trying to make ends meet for the family. It's a very touching story, and it's very powerful. I understand that. But that's not the direction this country is going in. And I mean, even ExxonMobil, by the way, who deals in oil, whose former head is Trump's Secretary of State, they're urging Trump to stay in this. So at this point, we have to say, these jobs that you're talking about, start focusing on converting these jobs to the future, to solar, to green jobs. I know there have been some failures in the past with like Solyndra, where a lot of money has gone by the wayside, but that doesn't mean that's not the direction the country and the world is heading in. Right.
The logic and reasoning is backwards. According to Ray Kopp, who's the vice president at Resources for the Future, which is a DC think tank that specializes in this sort of thing, the world is going to decarbonize, and there's a lot of money to be made there. And we're backing out of that. We're taking ourselves out of the equation, and we stand to lose more than we stand to gain.
The environment was never my huge thing. But as I get older, I'm like, these a chunk of the Arctic, the size, or Antarctica, the size of Rhode Island, is floating around or doing God knows what. Maybe I should start worrying about it a little more than I have in the past. And Trump's his tag, he was waiting for his tagline. I represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris. I want to say what Paris, Texas. That does exist, but it's the people of Pittsburgh don't like Trump. They did not vote for Trump. If you see the map of the electoral colleges, they did not vote for him. Plus, he has this view. I don't know if it was like 70s Pittsburgh, where the giant smokestacks. It's not what that town is like anymore. That city is like anymore. So I guess it was a good zinger in the moment, but it doesn't really hold up.
And Pittsburgh was quick to jump on board with the coalition of cities and states where the mayors and governors jumped on board with following the Paris Climate Accord, even though our president has backed the country out of it.
So I think I saw a poll earlier this week. It says 2-1 Americans are in favor of being in the Paris Accord. So I think it's too late, but the public opinion is against him on this, and that's something to say. That 66%. I mean, that's more than we've seen against Trump right now. And again, that sticks his absolute bottom of his base, 33%, 34%. That makes sense. So the people who are going to be with him no matter what. But you can like a politician and say they're wrong. Just because you're part of Trump's base doesn't mean you have to be with him every step of the way. Just like if you were part of Obama's base, doesn't mean you have to be with him every step of the way. You can say, guess what? He's dead wrong. Cole is dead, and he's dead wrong on this one. Although after some of the problems with comedians this week, maybe I shouldn't say Trump and dead in the same sentence. I might get in big trouble.
Yeah, you could go the way of Bill Maher.
Yeah, I was thinking about putting stuff about Bill Maher and Kathy Griffin in here. So you know what? Those are hot potatoes that I don't want to touch because I feel we don't have the clout to withstand a possible firestorm that might come our way, because you're going to piss off somebody probably in that conversation.
You mentioned Kathy Griffin for a second, and I completely understand, because last episode I talked about civility being dead. And, I don't believe we should be promoting, violent images of our president and such as Kathy Griffin did. But how quick we are to forget, the burning effigies of President Obama, the effigies hanging from nooses. Those things were done not just to President Trump. And where was the outcry then?
The outcry is never there when you're in favor for whatever reason. Though Norm Macdonald, one of my favorite comedians, made a comment. I don't know if it was an interview or a statement today saying, it really makes no sense, because in that situation, isn't Kathy Griffin ISIS? Shouldn't Trump have been cutting her head off? If you're trying to make a point of it really kind of made no sense. I don't know. And when it comes to the Bill Maher thing, I would actually say go listen to Kevin Hart's interview today. He actually said what I think most people should just should agree with, that Bill Maher should not have said what he was. It was stupid. It was tactless that he said it, but he's not a racist. He's there to help your side, and it makes no sense to be calling him a racist. But I guess that's all I'll say on that one without getting in trouble or making somebody angry. But before we move on, let's hear from one of our fellow podcasts on the Ace Podcast Network.
Hey everyone, venture into the pop culture cosmos today, where you'll hear our conversations on different topics within the world of movies, TV, video games, comic books, technology, board gaming, and more. You'll also get a taste of some of our other shows within the cosmos as well. So come on and join us each week as we delve into the pop culture cosmos.
Welcome to the pop culture cosmos.
Check out the Pop Culture Cosmos Show today on the Ace Podcast Network.
So the NATO meeting happened a couple of weeks ago, but there's always more to talk about when it comes to Trump and his meetings. As we mentioned, I think an episode or two ago, Trump spoke to NATO and he refused to reaffirm America's commitment to the mutual defense of the alliance members, Article 5, attack against one is attack against all, blah, blah, blah. We've heard this a million times. It also turns out that we're not the only people who are disappointed by that. It turns out his own national security officials were also both disappointed and confounded that it was failed to be in the language. H.R. McMaster, who is the National Security Advisor, James Mattis, who is the Defense Secretary, and the previously mentioned Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, all supported Trump putting that language in his speech, and they all thought it was going to be there until they listened to it, and then it wasn't. Yikes.
Well, it's important to note, is Trump really in a place to be taking that out and to be questioning whether or not the U.S. will support other countries that are part of NATO, since we are the only country that's ever actually cashed in on Article 5 of NATO. After 9/11, everyone came to our defense. So who are we now to back out of that?
Pence has said it. Other people have said it. Sean Spicer said, why would Trump say that? That was the whole point of that meeting. It makes no sense to say it when that's why you're there. Everybody else said it. Spicy. It's you just do it, whether it makes sense or not. It's what you do. It's you go there and you reaffirm your commitment. You shake hands, you hug. It's great. So McMaster, Mattis, and Tillerson, it was reported, maybe the adults in the room, but unfortunately Trump isn't in the room with them, so he's off doing whatever he wants. McMaster's been getting a lot of crap from us too, actually, because we've said we liked him in the past, but he's been saying this trip was a big success. It was wonderful. Mattis, however, has not necessarily joined in on the administration's spitting. Over the last weekend, he was at an Asian security forum in Singapore, and he tried to reassure the allies, don't freak out, don't freak out. No, he didn't say it, but we're all good. I know he's always saying America first, but we're all good. And when someone asked him about Trump's actions, Mattis quoted Winston Churchill, and I think his quote was, to quote a British observer of us from a few years back, bear with us. Once we have exhausted all other alternatives, the Americans will do the right thing. So we will still be there, and we will still be there with you. It played well with the audience. They laughed. They thought it was funny. But you shouldn't have to say that. It wouldn't be so funny if it wasn't so sad.
No, again, it's someone having to clean up Trump's mess yet again. And it shouldn't be far-fetched for us to think that Russia wouldn't act aggressively. I mean, look at the situation in the Ukraine since 2014. And while Ukraine's not a member of NATO, it's a European country. Russia is still going to, in my opinion, attempt to use its force and use its weight and muscle to intimidate countries in Eastern Europe. And, we owe it to those countries who have supported us and who we have traditionally supported to be there to help defend them. Donald Trump wants other countries to rely more on their own selves for their defense. Right? You go back to a 2016 campaign event, the CNN town hall with Anderson Cooper, where he said that Japan and South Korea should get nuclear weapons to defend themselves against North Korea. These types of comments have potentially disastrous effects for the world if he truly believes them and hopes to see them carried out.
Yeah, he just doesn't see it that way because, he's the Don. Oh, I think this is the final thing I want to talk about today, at least, was Trump's conflict of interest. It's been going on since the beginning of the administration, especially as it pertains to Trump's children, Eric and Don Jr., and his Trump business. He's supposed to be totally separate from it, shouldn't be hearing anything about it, but that's not going to stop them from telling Daddy how the business is going. Eric Trump told ABC News today that he shares Trump business profit reports with the president, but says, it doesn't blur the lines. It's separate. It's totally different from the presidency. You're allowed to do that. He says, you're allowed to do that. You can look at it. And I'll still remember he's the president. But this quote just drives me, we don't talk about activities in the business. We don't talk about what we're doing with the business. I don't think anybody actually believes that. Do they?
I should hope not. We're relying on them to, use the honor system that they're not going to discuss the goings on of Trump's businesses that he has been the chief executive of for the last 40 years. Do we really believe that now that he's president, he's truly going to step away if they're discussing the business practices? I don't know. That just seems too unlikely to me.
If he's really distancing himself from the company, the people who are running it, his sons in this case, shouldn't be sharing or discussing anything with him. It's like, hey, son, what's new with you? Well, Dad, business is booming, but I can't tell you anything, so let's talk about something else. No. He's probably like, here, Dad, it's great. Let me show you what's going on. No one's paying attention to things right now in the Oval Office with the door closed.
Well, what's concerning, if you listen to Eric Trump's interview, it was a pre-taped interview on Good Morning America this morning. He talked about sharing profit reports with his father, and he said, it doesn't blur the lines. You're allowed to show that. And remember, the president of the United States has zero conflicts of interest. Zero. Just the way that he says this. He speaks much like his father. Like, I know the rules. Don't question me. We're good.
Any normal human being in the past who was president would have said, you know what? I don't know if there are conflicts of interest or not, but just to make sure everything appears to be on the up and up, I won't meet with my in this case my children, but with the people who took over the business and discuss anything about the business, just because I want to be totally transparent. But that's not the case with this presidency and this administration.
All right, we're not dealing with just any other president.
We are not. Well, that was a lot of information to talk about. What do you got for Kevin's Corner this week?
Well, Jesse, presidents are often concerned with building a legacy to speak to their accomplishments for all of our posterity, to be represented in the history books as a true champion of our American democracy. In the past week, President Trump has taken two separate stances on issues that could potentially make or break his legacy of leadership. First, in reiterating his demand for a travel ban, his insistence on calling it such, he is pushing us towards isolation, closing our borders and turning our backs on those who seek refuge here, in order to give the U.S. a false sense of safety and security. Second, in abandoning the Paris Climate Accord, the president has attempted to make good on a campaign promise of revival to those in the outdated American fossil fuel industries such as coal. Both of these decisions walk America back a century in time. History rewards those who lead America towards progress and greatness. By turning our back on our ideals and the environment, we are stepping down from our leadership role in the world. This seems contradictory to the president's own promise to make America great again. Of this, history will remember.
Indeed we will. Much like an elephant, history never forgets. Well, I want to thank again everybody for listening. It's always great to have you guys on board and enjoying our podcast. Remember, if you want to support us, that could be $1, $2, $5, whatever you got. You can go to patreon.com/grab. That's patreon.com/grab. We appreciate it. We have some cool, prizes or gifts for you. We can give you a shout out on the show. We can mention a topic of your choosing, give you a t-shirt, whatever it takes. You can also just go to our website at www.grabthembythepod.com. You'll find all the links to our podcast and to our social media sites and a couple of handsome pictures of Kevin and I as well. Me and Kevin and me. When I was into politics, I was not an English major. I apologize.
Kevin and me.
That's what I thought, actually, but I just didn't want to edit. I figured we'd leave this little conversation in there and you guys can laugh at me and enjoy it. Until next time, thanks, Kevin.
Later.